Good morning, class. Last time we were working on refactoring your yin-yang project, so that would be using variables instead of hard coding. No fixed points, but using things in relationship to width and height to allow for your program to be dynamic. So if the size of your window were to increase or decrease, that the proportions of your drawings would also incrementally increase or decrease and not look distorted. So that refactoring is something that is important in computer science because the user interfaces that people have are various sizes. The screens are not of common width and height. So a tablet, cell phone, laptop, all those have different screen sizes. So making your code dynamic helps it to fit onto the various screen sizes. Very important stuff. Okay, so today we're going to be working a little bit with some conditional statements using your processing platform. And this is all found on my website. It will be in the link with this email, but for reference sakes, we're still on this PowerPoint: shapes, variables, loops, functions, animations, and arrays. So that's still where we are at right now. Conditional statements allow for your program to make a decision based upon the conditions that you set up. So in this particular conditional statement, we have determined that we have a variable called temperature. It is of type integer, and it is holding the value of 90. So the conditional statement says if temperature is greater than 85, your console will print line it is hot outside. Else, it is pleasant outside, meaning that it is going to be less than 85 degrees. Now let's just copy and paste this. It should be pretty easy to put right into a Control C, go into your processing, Control V, run this. Oh, it doesn't like my quotations here. I have to re-put in the quotes. It didn't transfer that format over. And I will have to do this with all examples, I believe. And as you can see that the top one corrected itself. The red underlined characters are gone. So now then let's run this and see what our console says. Down here it says, sorry, let's there. It's, I saw it somewhere on there. For some reason, I'm sorry about that. The print line did come up, but it just was at the very bottom of my console, so you can scroll up and down. So with this conditional statement here, we have the temperature set at 90, which is greater than 85, so it should print out it is hot outside right here. Now, if I were to change this value to say 80, now the temperature is now not greater than 85, so it should say that it is pleasant outside. So let's run this, and now it says it is pleasant outside. So those conditional statements are handy to have your program make a decision based on several factors. Back into our presentation here. We just adjusted that here. Now, can we add in more statements or more conditions? Sure. So in this particular one, if we were to read through this, we have set the temperature to being 70. If that temperature is greater than 85, it's going to say it's hot outside. Else, if the temperature is less than 50, it is going to say it's cold outside. Else, only when the variable is going to be, when temperature is going to be greater than 50 and less than 85, then it will say it is pleasant outside. So we have three options here of it saying it's going to say either it's hot outside, it's cold outside, or it's pleasant outside based upon the temperature and gauging whether or not that temperature is going to be less than 50 or if it's going to be greater than 85. So let's run this in our processing program. Let's see what it says. It probably will not like my quotations. It'll say that it has some issues with that maybe. Oh, it is pleasant outside. It doesn't. So right here, it is pleasant outside. That means that the temperature is 70, so that it is not going to make this condition right here. It is not greater than 85, so it won't do that. 70 is not less than 50, so it will not say that. It'll fall down to this else condition here, and that would print off. So if I were to change the temperature above in the variable standing here to say 90, which is now greater than 85, it should run right into that first condition and say it is hot outside. It does say it's hot outside. So that would be a else if else statement. So if else if else. Good example there. We do have a bunch of examples set up for us in our libraries. So this one is example 2-02. If we look at this before we run it, let's just see what it says so we can maybe figure out what it does. We've got our setup, so we have a window that is 480 width by 120 height. We're going to use our draw method. Here we go. If mouse pressed, then fill with white, else, believe that is fill with, no, this is black. I'm sorry, the else fill with white. And it will fill that circle with your X and Y of your, so wherever your mouse is, X and Y, and it will make a circle of diameter 80 by 80. Okay, so let's run this. I'm going to just go right into my examples and grab example 202. So what we do here is just, remember we imported this library earlier. So we have examples. If you did not import this example, this contributed library, getting started with processing, I'm going to show you how to do that. Add example. It's this one right here, getting started with processing, and then you would select that and then hit install. But I've already done that, so it won't allow me to do that. So we're now looking for example 202. Example 202. And we run this. Now, as I move around here, it will track my mouse X and my mouse Y. As I push down on my mouse pad, it then changes it to black and then moves forward with circles at that point in time. I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier for us to see this. Let's really explode this window. Big window here. As I move around, it is creating an ellipse at my mouse X, mouse Y, with a common radius, I believe, of 80 by 80. Now, if I hold it down, it now changes the color to black, and I now continually make those ellipses in black. Neat example there. Loops, very important feature within computer science is the ability to have the computer do a lot of work for you, and one way that we do that is utilization of loops. So this here is an example of how to print numbers 0 through 9, and I'm going to show you how that works. So we set up what is called a for loop. We need to establish a starting point. So here is your beginning at 0. So we initialize a variable. We have called it I, and it is an integer, and it starts off at 0. Here is your condition to be met. As long as I is less than 10, we will do whatever it says inside these brackets here. And then we're going to bring i's value up by 1. So if it is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. So next time it comes through here, I is 1. 1 is less than 10, print I. Reevaluate I becomes 2. 2 is still less than 10, print I. Add 1 to I or increment it, I becomes 3. 3 is less than 10, etc. So if we ran this, this is a basic code to print values 0 through 9. Let's grab this here. So we have our values 0 through 9, as you can see them below. And if we wanted to have different values, we would manipulate this for loop. It starts off at 0, less than 10, so it cannot equal 10. But if I were to put less than, or equal to 10. Just simply like that. Now it will run 0 through 10. 10 being the last number there, 0 at the top. Okay, so that's a for loop. Now, say for instance, we wanted to print 1,000. 0 through 1,000. Well, instead of having the monotony of doing it yourself, you can just manipulate that for loop, hit run, and your computer will do this for you. So now we have a listing of 0 through 1,000. As you can see, the console, they're printing those out. The console will only go to 500 lines. So what we have here is a problem with just the amount of information the console could hold. But it did start off at 0 and it goes up to 1,000. Okay, so as we discussed earlier, we initialize a variable I to 0, increment I by 1 until it is less than 10. For every distinct value of I, execute the statements within the curly brackets. So these are the curly brackets. So this one here gives you a print line with the value, so it does a little bit of a label to I. So let's see what that looks like. Copy and paste this. Now, it doesn't like my quotations. So running this now, the value of I is 0, the value of I is 1. So this will be repeated in I. Now it is not in quotations, means that it will get its value from this for loop. When it is in quotations, it is just simply a string of letters. It doesn't get manipulated. It gets reprinted exactly as it is stated inside of those quotation marks. So maybe you wanted a semicolon there. Maybe you wanted a colon there to make it look a little more professional. And we're going to do that. Now then you see in here, it has a little colon there. Okay, so working with the for loops, very important things. So here's a couple examples from our textbook, example 4.7. Let's run 4.7 and 4.8 and see what those look like. So go to our library, our examples, 4.7. Oh, I didn't grab the right one, sorry. 4.7, let's run that. Okay, a bunch of diagonal lines, equal distance apart. Cool. Let's look at 4.8. Okay, lines, however, they now have a, looks like more separation. The bottoms look like, the bottom of the line separation looks to be greater than that of the top. Okay. So, interesting. Here we are. We have our first one that this is just a bunch of lines. Right here. Let's take a look at this one here. Now this is, lines are increasing a little bit differently. Okay, so let's take a look at our code here. I is 20. As long as I is less than 400, we're going to jump by 8. So our first line is going to start at 20. X, Y is 40. Okay, so we go over by 20, down 40. So that'll be our first point right there. Drawing that line to I plus 60. I is 20. So 20 plus 60 is 80, and then 80. So we're going to go over 80 and then down 80. So that'll be the end point for line 1. Now as I increases, it'll continue to go down and draw these other lines. So next time, I is going to be 28. It'll be increased by 8. So I is 28. So X is 28, Y is 40. The next X coordinate is going to be 28 plus 60, so that's at 88. And then it's 88 for the X, and then its Y is 80. Whereas on this one here, we are jumping up by X is I, so 20 incremented by 20. So X is going to be 20, 40, 60, 80. So 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, all the way up to 400. whereas this x coordinate, the other anchor point for your line, is going to be jumping up by a 1.5. So instead of increment 1, these are jumps of 20. These are going to be jumps of 30. So we'll start to stretch out the bottom. So this is the way I get 30 is I is 20, so 20 divided by 2 is 10, plus the original value of 20 makes 30. Okay, so that's how you can jump through those. Let's go back and look at what we got here. Okay, so now then we need to do an exercise here with our 4.8 code. Draw two horizontal lines that connect the vertical lines on top and bottom to make a boardwalk. Okay, I'll work with this one on this particular video lesson, so let's get that set up. We're going to try and make this one look like this. We're going to start with 4.8 though. We have 4.8 of them. We do. All right, so this here is just going to have the lines, and we're going to need to draw a top and bottom line to house this up and make it kind of look like a boardwalk going off into the distance. Great. So we have our original for loop set it up here. Those lines are good. Okay, so there's a variety of ways that we can do this. First off, let's see what we can do about getting a line across the top, and then we can see about a line along the bottom. So let's add some space in here to code a little bit. Let's try another line here. And I need to start at the top. So its x and y will be the same as the previous ones, except that the point 2 will not be the same. Point 1 will be the same. Point 2, however, needs to jump up by a bit. If we're going to think that we're going to go x, y, the y is going to be the same because we're running along the top axis, and we're jumping the second x up by 20. So that's going to be I plus 20. Now, let's run that and see what it looks like. Now we have our line going across the top. It does hang over a little bit here. I'm going to work on that in a second. But let's do our bottom line, which is going to be, let's see, line. Now it is at an angle a little bit down, so it is going to be, if we were to look at our example here, exercise 1, this is at 20, I is 20, x is 0, so that is 20 over 0 down. This looks to be about 30 over and probably 80 down, because that's the height of our line that we started with. So we're going to do 30 down, which is going to be I plus I divided by 2. So that's my x. And then my y for my first point is going to be 80. And the x for the second point is going to be, we've determined that each one of those values is by 30. So that's by 30. So we're going to go another, well, it's going to be more than 30. It's going to be, let's check and see what, just putting in there 30 and 80. Now that is probably not going to be right, and we'll take a look at it and see. They were getting close here. Let's make our window bigger so we can take a look at the end of that. Nice, not bad at all. Now we just have that little tail there at the very top that I'll need to take care of. So one of the easiest ways to take care of that top tail is to put in an if statement here, I believe, to just sort of stop that design. So, or stop that line. So if I becomes let me just kind of fiddle here a little bit. Let's see if I is less than 370. Let's try that. And then we put another one down here. Didn't work. Now the bottom is now off a little bit. So let me fiddle around with this for a second. Okay, so I believe that because it does tail off at the far end, my x coordinate of my last line there, I believe, is not correct. So we need to change that up. I believe that I plus I divided by 2 plus 30. That should jump us there. So if we have I being 20, that is going to be 30 plus 30 is 60. So then that's going to jump up faster than the top. And oh, look, there it is, person. Perfect. So we have now bound in our lines to make what looks like a boardwalk. Now, if you ever get confused about what your values are doing, you can put in here a print line. So you can say something like print line, and this is a debugging tool, quote, I want to know what I want to know what my I plus 1/2 of I is as it goes through this loop. So I'm going to type in I plus I divided by 2. Now, in my console, I will find out what that value of I plus I divided by 2 is as it goes through that loop. So it jumps up by 30. So you can see, okay, so that value is going up 30 each time it goes through that loop, which is to be expected. So you can debug a little bit. So this one's going up by 30. Now then, let's just say, for instance, I did some encapsulation here and I added on plus 30. I think I want to make sure I do this first. And take one of those out. Now, this should be jumping up by 60. Those jumping up by 30 as well. For some reason that doesn't quite make sense to me. Let's look at I again. I is 20. We're inside our for loop, so that's 10 plus 20 is 30 plus 30 should be 60. So then the first value should be 60. That's right. The next value, let's see, so I jumps up to 40. Half of 40 is 20 plus 40 is 60 plus 30 is 90. So it jumps up to 90, so it jumps up by 30 there. Okay, so that's how that value works. So you can kind of get an idea of what is going on in your code by doing these print lines and walking through them. Okay, continuing along with our examples here. This one is one I'm going to get you started on, and then I'm going to have you do your assignment. So you're going to write a code using loops and conditional statements that will display this pattern here. So we've got some lines drawn out vertically, and we're going to take a look at how we can make that happen. So I'm going to start the code off for you, and you're going to finish it. So I'm going to start a new processing program here. Just go right here. Perfect. I'm just going to delete all of that, starting right at the very beginning. So we need to get our void draw. Setup, sorry, void setup. And let's put our size as a relatively large window. And maybe make smooth. Now we're into our avoid draw method. Give me a little space to code. Okay, so I'm going to make a few rectangles that will fit inside our window using our variables of height, and then we're going to see how that looks, and maybe we can work from there. Okay, so I'm going to have, what I'm going to do here, I think, is I'm going to make my background white, and I'm going to draw every other rectangle in maybe like a color, like a green or a red, something like that. Starting off with our first one, and then so I'm going to rotate through. So the opposite colors are going to be the background, and I'm going to draw rectangles for every other one of those. I think that would be the easiest way for me to do this. So let me think. I can probably set my background up. Let's say our background is going to be, let's make it white. Okay. Now the background is set as white. My first rectangle, I'm going to make a red one. Let's just say it's red. Okay, so I have dipped my paintbrush in red. I'm going to make a rectangle at 0, 0. Let's have the width of it be 20 and the height of it be the height of our window that we're creating. So now then we have a red rectangle coming out of here somewhere. Right there. Perfect. Okay, so now then what we need to do is we need to make a second rectangle, but it needs to be over on the x coordinate. So I'm going to try 20, 0, 20 height and see what that does. So I've moved it over 20. Now I'm pretty sure this isn't going to work, simply for the fact that I know that now then it is only moved over 20, whereas the original width of our rectangle was 20. So it just drew one right next to it. So let's say if we jumped over maybe 40. Okay, now we have a secondary line there. Let's jump over, and with this same thought process, let's move and draw a third rectangle. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And looking like we're jumping up by 40, so our next one would be at 80. Let's run that. Okay, you could continue to do this the entire width of this screen here. However, that would be pretty inefficient, and we're expected to use a loop to draw these. So now you kind of got the pattern set up. Let's see if we can set up our for loop. All right, so let me get a for loop set up. For loop, we initialize I. Integer I is starting out at 0. As long as I is less than or equal to our height, I'm going to continue to increment I by 20. I is going to equal I plus 20. So with that, okay, so this would create a way of jumping by 20s. We would draw a rectangle inside this for loop, and it would jump by 20s. So let's take a look at how that's going to work. So if I did a new rectangle, I'm going to fill it with red. Actually, I'm going to fill it with a different color so we can see it. Let's do it with blue, RGB. And I'm going to create a rectangle. Let's go at I 0, 20 height. Okay, so now we're going to start off at 0 and 0. We're going to make our rectangle a width of 20, and it's going to go the height of the window, and it's going to be blue. So that's not working well because now it has done it at every single window. Okay, so We're really close here. Without doing all of this for all the all up here, we don't need that. As long as we know. And a way to comment out code is 2 forward slashes, and it will remove that. So a real quick fix for our coding here. I did note that that variable needed to reference width, not height, because I is incrementing. We're using the value of I to increment our width, the X, as it's going across that canvas or the print line, the printout. So anyways, I changed that value from height to width. They do have the same values, being as both are 500. However, if we were to adjust those, this could be an issue, so we need to correct that now. But noting how the X coordinate for our rectangle is going from 20 to 40 to 60, and the width of our rectangle is 20, they're just being laid one next to each other. So a quick fix would be to increment our X value by, say, 40, so that it draws the first one at 0, then the next one at 40, with the width of that rectangle being 20. So I'm just going to simply change how fast or how much I is being incremented by, in this case here, by 40, and looking to see what that does. We have ourselves now the design that we are looking for.